They say life has a twisted sense of humor. Mine decided to prove it in the waiting room of an OB/GYN clinic. There I was, clutching my appointment card with clammy hands, feeling both nervous and excited about hearing my baby's heartbeat again. Pregnancy isn't glamorous, no matter what Instagram moms pretend. I was bloated, exhausted, and craving a sandwich I wasn't even allowed to eat. But still, I was proud of myself. I was here for my baby. Then the automatic door slid open, and in walked the last two people I ever wanted to see, my ex-husband, and the woman he traded me in for. I almost laughed. Almost. Because of all the places in the city, of all the possible timings, the universe chose this. A prenatal clinic. Where I sat alone, vulnerable, pregnant, while he strolled in, one arm wrapped smugly around her waist as if parading a trophy. She looked polished, glamorous, perfectly coordinated in designer heels that had no business being in a clinic. Well, he looked the same, arrogant, too sure of himself, the kind of man who mistakes volume for authority. I pulled my hoodie tighter, as if I could vanish. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my face froze in what I hoped looked like indifference. Of course, fate wasn't done mocking me. The nurse at the desk perked up, her tone suddenly dripping with recognition. "Mr. Reynolds, we didn't expect you today?" Oh, so he was well known here? I clenched my jaw, my chest burned. But then, something shifted. A cold, bitter amusement spread through me. I thought, how perfect, how absolutely cinematic. My life had officially turned into a soap opera, and I was stuck in the front row, starring in a show I never asked to audition for. They sat just 2 seats away, close enough for me to smell his cologne, the same one that used to linger on my pillow. My stomach twisted, not from the pregnancy, but from memories that refused to die quietly. I kept my eyes down, but my ears had no choice. Nurses whispered at the desk, giggling in hushed tones, not realizing or not caring that every syllable carried across the waiting room. "He's here again," one whispered. "Twice in 1 month, with her, always making a scene." And the doctor said something about complications? Complications. The words sliced through me. I froze, my hand instinctively moving to my belly. What complications? With them? With her? My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't supposed to care. I shouldn't care. He was my past. But the way the nurses exchanged knowing looks, it lit a spark of curiosity, one I hated myself for feeling. My ex leaned in closer to her, whispering something that made her giggle too loud. He glanced around, eyes scanning the room, and for a fleeting second, his gaze met mine. His smirk faltered. Just a flicker. But I saw it. A shadow behind his confidence. And that was when it hit me. Whatever game he was playing here, it wasn't as flawless as he wanted the world to believe. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe evenly. Everyone around me thought I was the humiliated ex-wife, sitting alone with swollen ankles. Maybe I was. For now. But as I shifted in my chair, one thought anchored itself in my chest, sharper than the shame, louder than the whispers. If he thinks I'm gonna sit here quietly and let him flaunt his perfect little world, he doesn't know me anymore. I straightened my back, lifted my chin, and thought, they all laugh at me now, but they have no idea. The real story hasn't even begun. My name is Claire Morgan. I'm 37 years old, and if someone had told me 10 years ago that this would be my life, sitting alone in a clinic, divorced, pregnant, and starting over, I would have laughed in their face. Because 10 years ago, I thought I had it all. I married Matthew Reynolds when I was 26. He was ambitious, charming, and knew how to make a room bend to his will. People said he was a man going places. And me? I was the quiet one in the corner, the one who believed in him so fiercely that I gave up my own career dreams to support his. Back then, it didn't feel like a sacrifice. I thought we were a team. He would rise, I would steady him. I told myself love meant compromise, even if it was always me doing the compromising. We tried for children. Year after year, disappointment after disappointment. I watched friends and cousins have babies while I sat in sterile exam rooms, doctors giving me sympathetic smiles and rehearsed reassurances. Matthew became distant. Cold. He stopped holding my hand after appointments. Eventually, he stopped coming with me at all. And then, 3 years ago, he left. Just like that. No dramatic fight, no slammed doors. He simply announced he needed more and moved out the next week. Within months, she appeared, the polished brunette who now walks by his side like she won the lottery. The irony? The moment he left, My body did what it had refused to do for years. I conceived. With someone else. A brief, fragile attempt at moving on. The relationship didn't last, he wasn't ready, I wasn't healed. But the pregnancy did. This baby is mine. My miracle. My chance to rewrite the story I thought was over. Still, that doesn't mean it's easy. Every morning, I fight exhaustion just to roll out of bed. My feet swell, my back aches, my bank account shrinks. I juggle freelance projects from home, typing through nausea and deadlines, trying to convince myself I can do this without falling apart. And yet, despite the chaos, I feel alive in a way I never did in my marriage. This little heartbeat inside me is the only thing that's truly mine. No one can take it away. At least, that's what I tell myself. Until moments like today remind me how fragile I still am. Sitting in that waiting room, watching Matthew's arm draped casually around her shoulders, I realize something brutal. Deep down, I still crave vindication. I don't just want to survive. I want the truth to come out. I want everyone, especially him, to see that I wasn't the broken one. That I wasn't the failure. But if you asked me what my greatest weakness is, it's simple. I care too much about what people think. I've always been that way. The girl who bites her tongue, who lets others shine, who swallows humiliation because it's not worth the fight. And now? Now I'm standing at the edge of motherhood, carrying a child into a world where appearances matter, and I can't stop wondering, how do I raise someone strong when I've spent most of my life being small? The truth is, I don't know. But I do know this. Seeing Matthew today stirred something I thought had died. I'm done being the quiet one in the corner. I don't know what the nurses meant by complications, but the flicker in his eyes when he saw me, like he'd been caught in a secret, told me there's more to this story. More than he wants anyone to know. And for the first time in years, I'm not just the one being left behind. I'm the one watching, waiting, and this time, I won't look away. If life were a stage, the clinic waiting room was only the opening act. The real drama unfolded in the places where our worlds refused to stop colliding. The truth is, this isn't the only time I've seen Matthew since the divorce. Our town isn't huge. The grocery store, the coffee shop near Main Street, even the gas station, he's everywhere. And somehow, she's always glued to his side, like an accessory he wants everyone to notice. But the clinic? That was different. That was my place. My sanctuary. The one spot I thought belonged only to me and my child. After that day, I couldn't shake the image of him walking those halls as if he owned them. I needed answers. Why here? Why so often? So the following week, after my checkup, I lingered longer than usual. Instead of rushing home, I sat in the small cafe tucked inside the medical complex. It's the kind of place where the coffee is lukewarm, the muffins are overpriced, but the walls are thin enough to hear conversations if you sit close enough. I chose a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. And like clockwork, there they were. Matthew, in his tailored blazer, pretending this sterile clinic was some boardroom he could dominate. Her, dressed as if for a magazine spread, clinging to him with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I sipped my coffee, bitter and burnt, watching them check in at the counter. The receptionist's tone shifted again, warm, familiar, too practiced. That kind of tone you use when you've seen someone too many times. And then I noticed something. The way she leaned into him, yes, but also the way her hand lingered on her stomach. Just a second too long. Subtle, almost invisible. But I saw it. My chest tightened. Could she be pregnant too? The thought burned through me, ugly and raw. It shouldn't matter. Matthew's life was no longer mine to dissect. But the irony of it, him parading around with the woman who replaced me, the one who supposedly had everything I lacked, now possibly carrying the child I never could give him. I forced my breathing steady. I couldn't spiral. Not here, not in public. Instead, I watched. From my corner table, I could see the nurses whispering again. One of them glanced my way, almost apologetic, as if she knew I had no business hearing any of this. Tests didn't come back right, one murmured. Doctor said more scans, risks involved. Risks, scans, tests. I gripped my paper cup until it crumpled in my hands. Matthew's laugh carried across the cafe, too loud, too performative. He was trying to drown out the truth even here. And she kept nodding, smiling, but her eyes betrayed her. Fear. Just a flicker, but I knew it. I sat frozen, a storm brewing inside me. Because suddenly, the clinic wasn't just a backdrop to my humiliation. It was something else entirely. It was the stage where his carefully constructed image was cracking, and I was right there to see it happen. For years I had been the quiet witness to my own life falling apart. But now I was the witness to his. The cafe buzzed with ordinary chatter, spoons clinking, machines hissing, people scrolling their phones. But to me, the air was thick with tension, every sound drowned out by the pounding of my heartbeat. And in that moment, I realized this clinic, this cafe, these hallways, they weren't just mine anymore. They were ours. The battlefield neither of us chose, but one where the truth was already bleeding through the cracks. I took a deep breath, smoothed my sweater over my growing belly, and whispered to myself, if this is the stage, then I won't sit in the audience anymore. People like to say divorce reveals a person's true character. If that's true, then Matthew Reynolds revealed himself to be a master manipulator. When we were married, he wore the mask of the charming husband, the provider, the dreamer, the man who would build an empire. But behind closed doors, the cracks were there. Little digs about my weight, subtle reminders that I wasn't enough. And when the fertility tests came back negative, he didn't say it out loud, but his silence screamed the accusation. This is your fault. I carried that shame for years. And maybe that's why the betrayal cut so deep, because by the time he finally left, I was already broken down enough to believe I deserved it. But now, seeing him with her, I understand something I couldn't see before. He didn't just betray me as a wife. He betrayed me as a human being. Take last week, for example. I was leaving the clinic, clutching my ultrasound picture like a lifeline, when I heard his voice outside. Loud, calculated, meant to be overheard. Claire's still coming here? Pathetic, isn't it? She clings to anything to make herself feel relevant. I froze mid-step. He knew I was there. He wanted me to hear. His girlfriend laughed on cue, a rehearsed little giggle that scraped against my nerves. Pathetic. That word followed me all the way home, echoing in my head while I microwaved leftovers and cried into the steam. And that's how Matthew worked. He didn't have to raise his hand or his voice. He just planted words like poison and waited for them to rot you from the inside. But there's something else now. I've started to notice the cracks in his performance with her. The way he squeezes her wrist too tightly when he thinks no one is watching. The way her smile stiffens, her eyes darting nervously before snapping back into place. And then, last Thursday, I saw it plain as day. I was in line at the pharmacy counter, picking up prenatal vitamins when they walked in together. She was whispering something urgent, almost pleading. He cut her off mid-sentence, voice sharp, hissed through clenched teeth. Not here. Do you want everyone to know? She shrank back instantly, like a child scolded. Everyone around pretended not to notice, but I saw it. I felt it. That wasn't love. That was control. And then he spotted me. His expression shifted in an instant, from anger to smugness, like slipping on a different mask. He tightened his arm around her, tilted his head, and said loudly enough for me to hear, "Don't worry, sweetheart, everything's gonna be perfect for us." It was a performance, meant for an audience of one, me. I should have looked away. I should have walked out. But I didn't, because in that moment I realized something chilling. Matthew doesn't just want to move on with his life. He wants to rewrite history. He wants me to look small, broken, irrelevant, so that his story with her shines brighter in comparison. And she's not innocent either. She knows exactly who I am. I caught her smirk once, a flash of triumph when she noticed my swollen belly. She leaned close to him, whispered something, and they both laughed, as if my pregnancy was a punchline. Maybe she thinks she won. Maybe she thinks she's different. But I know Matthew. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. His betrayals don't stop once he chooses his next victim. They just evolve. As I walked out of the pharmacy that day, clutching the bag with my vitamins, one thought burned hotter than my humiliation. He might think he's the author of this story, but he's wrong. Because this time, I'm taking notes. And when the truth finally comes out, about him, about her, about the secrets they're so desperate to hide, I'll be the one holding the pen. It happened on a Saturday morning, the kind where the entire town seems to gather in one place. The farmer's market stretched across Main Street, colorful stalls lined with flowers, fresh produce, and homemade jams. I went there because I needed a break from the suffocating walls of my apartment And honestly, because I wanted to feel normal again, just a pregnant woman buying peaches. Nothing more, nothing less. The air smelled of roasted coffee and cinnamon bread. Families strolled by, kids tugging on balloons, couples laughing with their bags of apples. For once, I let myself believe I belonged in that picture. Until I heard his voice. Matthew's voice cuts through any crowd, like a knife through glass. I froze near a stall of sunflowers, my hand instinctively moving to shield my belly. And then I saw them, Matthew and her. His arm around her as always, his laugh just a little too loud, carrying over the music of a street performer nearby. But this time, they weren't just another couple browsing stalls. This time, they had an audience. A group of his colleagues from the firm stood around them, shaking hands, clapping his back, praising him like the golden boy he's always played. And right there, in the middle of Main Street, he decided to put on a show. "Everyone, meet the woman who changed my life," he announced, his hand possessively on her waist. "After years of disappointment, I finally have a future worth celebrating." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Years of disappointment. I knew exactly what he meant. He wasn't talking about business. He was talking about me. About the years we spent trying, failing, grieving in silence. And now he was twisting that pain into his narrative of triumph. People laughed politely, clapped, congratulated him. A few even glanced at me, because of course, in a town this small, half of them knew who I was. Their pity was worse than their silence. I wanted the ground to swallow me. My throat burned. My eyes stung, but I refused to cry there. Not in front of him. Not in front of them. But then he crossed the line. "She's everything I ever wanted," he continued, his voice dripping with pride, strong, healthy, able to give me what I never had before. Gasps rippled through the group. Some shifted uncomfortably, finally realizing what he was really saying. But it was too late. The words were out there. My humiliation served like entertainment on a Saturday morning. I gripped the edge of the flower stall until my knuckles turned white. And then, it happened. She placed her manicured hand over her stomach. Not casually this time, deliberately. And Matthew beamed, letting the implication hang in the air. Pregnant. That single word echoed in every corner of my mind. I felt the world tilt, sounds fading into a blur. All I could hear was my own pulse pounding in my ears. He wasn't just erasing me, he was replacing me. Right there, in front of the whole town. I stumbled back, nearly knocking over a bucket of tulips. The vendor muttered something, but I didn't hear. My body moved on instinct, pushing me through the crowd, away from their eyes, away from his smirk. But before I could escape, I caught something. Two women from the clinic, nurses I'd seen before, stood at the coffee stall whispering. Their words cut through the noise. They shouldn't announce anything yet. "Doctor said it's not certain. High risk." I froze. High risk. Not certain. I turned just enough to see Matthew's girlfriend laughing, glowing under the spotlight he created for her. But now I knew something the crowd didn't. Something he was desperate to hide. And that knowledge, small, fragile, but powerful, was the only thing that kept me from collapsing right there in the middle of Main Street. I walked away, head high, tears blurring my vision, one thought burning brighter than all the shame. They all think I'm the broken one, but the truth, the cracks aren't in me anymore. I didn't make it home that day without breaking. By the time I shut my apartment door, the tears I had fought so hard to hold back came pouring out, ugly and unstoppable. I slid to the floor, still clutching the bag of peaches I had bought, the fruit bruising against the tiles as if mirroring me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash something. But all I did was sob until my chest ached and my baby shifted inside me, as if reminding me I wasn't alone. The humiliation replayed in my mind on a loop. Matthew's voice, sharp and deliberate. Years of disappointment. Her hand on her stomach. The way the crowd looked at me, not with cruelty but with pity. And somehow pity was worse. I didn't sleep that night. I tossed in bed, haunted by his words, by the thought of him building a new life while I was here, piecing myself together one day at a time. My body hurt. My back throbbed. My ankles were swollen. But the real ache was in my chest, a hollow cavity that no position could soothe. By morning, exhaustion clung to me like a second skin. I shuffled to the kitchen, poured cereal into a bowl, and couldn't even bring myself to eat. My reflection in the microwave startled me. Pale skin, puffy eyes, hair sticking out in messy clumps. I looked like a ghost of myself, and in many ways, I felt like one too. The phone rang at noon. I almost didn't answer, but it was my sister, Hannah. Her voice was bright at first, then softened when she heard mine. "Claire, what happened?" Word spreads fast in this town. Too fast. I wanted to lie, to brush it off, but instead the words tumbled out, about the market, about his speech, about how small I felt. There was a pause on the other end. Then Hannah said quietly, "He's trying to erase you. Don't let him." Simple words. But they cracked something open in me. Erase me. That's exactly what he was doing. Each public jab, each twisted performance, each smirk in my direction, it was all designed to make me disappear, to rewrite me as a footnote in his story. And for a while, it was working. The next few days blurred together. I barely left the apartment. The blinds stayed closed. I ate what little I could manage, slept in bursts, and cried more than I cared to admit. My body ached with the weight of pregnancy and despair, each step a reminder of how heavy everything had become. But in the quiet, in the stillness of my self-imposed prison, I started to think. And thinking led me to the memory of what I overheard. The nurses whispering about high risk, not certain. The detail Matthew hadn't paraded at the market. The truth he couldn't spin into applause. The more I replayed it, the more it grew inside me, not as joy, not as revenge, but as a spark of clarity. For years, Matthew controlled the story. He defined me, humiliated me, left me with the silence of infertility and the noise of gossip. But now, for the first time, I held something he didn't want anyone to know. A secret. The realization didn't erase my pain. I was still raw, still tender, still aching from years of being dismissed. But it planted something else inside me, alongside the life I was already carrying. Resolve. I stood in front of the mirror that night, resting my hands on my swollen belly. My face was blotchy from tears, my hair a mess, my eyes ringed with exhaustion. But I looked closer, and for the first time, I didn't just see the ghost. I saw someone who had survived, and someone who was done hiding. I whispered it to my reflection, my voice shaky but firm. He thinks I'm broken. He thinks I'm weak. But he's wrong. I'm not disappearing, not this time. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. Because for the first time in a long time, I believed them. The thing about secrets is they never stay buried. Not when you know exactly where to dig. It started with a coincidence. At least, that's what I thought. I had finally forced myself out of the apartment one afternoon, determined to prove I wasn't going to live like a ghost anymore. I stopped at the clinic pharmacy to pick up iron supplements. While waiting in line, I spotted a familiar face, the younger nurse I had overheard whispering at the market. She looked at me, hesitated, then offered a polite smile. Something in her eyes told me she remembered too. On impulse, I followed her outside after her shift. My heart pounded the whole time because I had no plan, no script, just raw desperation. "Excuse me," I blurted when she turned toward the parking lot. I know this is inappropriate, but I overheard you at the market about Matthew Reynolds and her. Please, I need to know if it's true." Her face paled. She glanced around nervously. "Ma'am, I can't discuss patients." I should have stopped there, but something in me broke free. The quiet, compliant version of myself snapped. "I was his wife for 10 years, I said, my voice trembling but strong. "I know what he's capable of. I know how he twists things. If she's pregnant, if something's wrong, he's going to use it to destroy me. Please. I'm not asking for gossip. I'm asking for the truth." She studied me for a long moment, her lips pressed tight, the weight of rules battling with the weight of compassion. Then finally she sighed. "All I can say is this. What you heard wasn't wrong. She's pregnant, but it's complicated. There are risks, serious ones, and he doesn't want anyone to know. Not yet." Her words hit me like a thunderclap. Complicated. Risks. I nodded, unable to breathe. "Thank you," I whispered. She hurried off, leaving me standing in the fading sunlight, my legs shaking. I should have felt triumphant. After all, I had confirmation of what I suspected. But what I really felt was conflicted. Because despite everything they'd done to me, despite the cruelty, the humiliation, I couldn't shake the image of her face at the pharmacy, pale and frightened, shrinking under his voice. She wasn't just his partner. She was also trapped. And yet, that didn't erase the truth. Matthew's carefully staged life was a fragile illusion. One wrong move, one whispered word, and it would all collapse. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, hands on my belly, thinking about my baby, about their baby, about how lives so different could be knotted together by one man's lies. And then, as the hours dragged by, I remembered something else. The insurance paperwork. During our marriage, Matthew had a habit of leaving documents lying around. Tax forms, contracts, insurance statements. I used to file them away neatly, the dutiful wife cleaning up after his chaos. And I remembered, his firm's insurance policy covered spouses, which meant if he had added her or claimed her pregnancy under his plan, there would be records. Records I knew how to find. By morning, I had a plan. I dug through the box of old papers I had shoved in my closet after the divorce, and there it was, my old login information for the insurance portal. My hands shook as I typed it in, half expecting it to be locked. But no. It opened. I scrolled through, my heart hammering harder with every click. And then, I found it. A claim. Recent. Filed under his name. For prenatal screenings. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just gossip, wasn't just whispers. It was real. Documented. And now, I had proof. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, my pulse thundering in my ears. Because this wasn't just about his girlfriend being pregnant. This was about him lying. To his colleagues, to his family, to everyone who thought he'd finally won. And for the first time since the market, I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. Because Matthew had always controlled the story. But now I held a piece of it he couldn't spin. And whether I used it or not, one thing was certain. His perfect little world wasn't as untouchable as he wanted everyone to believe. Holding that insurance record felt like holding dynamite. One click, one screenshot, and I had enough to shake Matthew's perfect little kingdom. But something inside me whispered, this isn't the whole story. And I was right, because the more I dug, the stranger it became. I told myself I was just checking for more claims, prenatal visits, lab work, the usual. But then, buried among the statements, I found a line item that made my breath catch. Specialist Consultation Oncology Department. I read it 3 times, certain I was mistaken. Oncology, that wasn't prenatal care, that was cancer. My pulse thundered. Who was it for? Her? Him? The claim didn't list a name, just dependent. But I knew. If it were Matthew, it would have been flagged under his profile. This was under hers. Suddenly the fragments started piecing themselves together. The hushed whispers, the nurse's tone, the fear in her eyes at the pharmacy. It wasn't just a high-risk pregnancy. It was something much bigger. She was sick, and Matthew didn't want anyone to know. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the laptop screen casting harsh light across my cluttered desk. My mind raced in circles, colliding with emotions I couldn't sort out. Anger, pity, confusion. Because here was the truth. The woman who replaced me, the woman who smirked at my swollen belly, was carrying a child while fighting something terrifying. And Matthew? He was spinning it into his victory lap, parading her around town like proof of his triumph. The cruelty of it stole my breath. And then another thought hit me like a brick. What if she didn't even know the full truth? What if he was hiding it from her too, twisting it the way he twisted everything? That possibility lit a fire in me. For years, I had been the one trapped in his shadow, believing the lies he fed me, shrinking under his control. But now, watching from the outside, I saw his game for what it was. And I realized I wasn't the only one he was destroying. The difference was, this time, I had proof. I printed the records, slipped them into a folder, and tucked it under my bed like a secret weapon. Just holding the papers steadied me. For once, I wasn't powerless. And yet, that night, as I lay awake, I felt something I hadn't expected. Guilt, because part of me wanted to use this information like a sword. To cut him down, to expose him. But another part of me, the part that still remembered what it felt like to be humiliated in public, thought of her. Did she deserve to be collateral damage in my war with him? I didn't have the answer. Not yet. But one thing was clear. Matthew's story wasn't bulletproof anymore. His empire of lies had cracks, and I was the only one who knew where they were. And for the first time since the divorce, I wasn't the hunted one. I was the hunter. I always thought transformation was something dramatic. Makeovers, gym memberships, a sudden revelation in front of a mirror. But that's not how it happened for me. For me, it began quietly. One morning, I stood in front of the bathroom sink, toothbrush in hand, and caught my reflection. My hair was limp, my skin pale, my eyes shadowed with exhaustion. For weeks, I had been letting myself fade, convinced that survival meant invisibility. But now, I wasn't invisible anymore. I was holding secrets, truths that could topple the man who had spent years making me feel small. And in that moment, I realized I didn't want to fade. I wanted to be seen. So I started small. I booked a haircut. Nothing drastic, just enough to shed the tired strands that clung like dead weight. I bought a dress that actually fit my pregnant body instead of hiding it under hoodies. I put on lipstick, just a shade brighter than I used to wear. The first time I walked into the clinic after that, heads turned. Not because I was glamorous, not because I was suddenly someone else, but because I carried myself differently. I wasn't hunched over, avoiding eye contact. I wasn't rushing to the corner seat. I stood tall, shoulders back, belly forward like a banner, daring anyone to look away first. And when Matthew saw me, his smirk faltered. Just for a second, but I saw it. That single flicker was worth every sleepless night. Because he wasn't used to this version of me. He was used to the ghost, the woman who bowed her head and bit her tongue. But now, every step I took was deliberate, every glance steady. I was no longer in his shadow. Outside the clinic, I started rebuilding the rest of my life too. I reached out to old contacts, picked up more freelance work, and for the first time since the divorce, I didn't apologize for charging what I was worth. My bank account grew slowly but steadily. I reconnected with people I had avoided out of shame. Old friends, even Hannah, who had been waiting for me to stop hiding. The first time I laughed over coffee with them, really laughed, I realized how long it had been since I'd felt like myself. And then there was the baby. Every kick, every flutter inside me became a reminder that I wasn't weak. My body, the same one Matthew once made me feel ashamed of, was carrying life. Strong, steady life. And no matter what he tried to project with her, I knew this. My child was real. My love was real. His world was built on lies. Mine wasn't. But the transformation wasn't just external. It was something deeper. Something in the way I thought, the way I spoke, the way I refused to shrink anymore. The proof came one afternoon at the cafe inside the clinic. Matthew walked in with her like always, performing his part. But this time, instead of slipping into the shadows, I held his gaze. He smirked, I smiled back. Calm, steady, unshaken. And that unsettled him more than any accusation could, because he knew. He didn't know what I had, not yet, but he felt it. The shift in power. The quiet confidence that when you stopped playing defense and started preparing for offense. I gathered my things, stood tall, and walked past him with my head high. I didn't need to say a word. My silence said everything. I'm not afraid of you anymore. That night, as I tucked the folder of documents back under my bed, I whispered to myself, this isn't about revenge anymore. This is about truth. And when the truth comes out, he won't be the one standing tall. And for the first time in years, I didn't just believe it. I knew it. It happened in the most fitting place. The firm's charity gala. Matthew's firm hosted it every year, an extravagant evening with champagne towers, glittering gowns, and endless speeches about community service. It was also Matthew's favorite stage. He thrived under spotlights, surrounded by applause, pretending he was the man everyone wanted to believe he was. This year, I almost didn't go, but then I thought about every word he'd thrown at me, pathetic, weak, invisible, and I knew this was where it had to happen. I borrowed a dress from Hannah, sleek black with a neckline that made me stand taller. My hair was pulled back, my lipstick bold. I wasn't hiding anymore. My baby bump was visible, and I didn't cover it. I wore it like armor. When I walked into that ballroom, conversations paused, eyes turned. Some widened in surprise, others in pity. But I didn't flinch, I let them look. And then I saw him, Matthew, standing at the center of it all, his hand glued to her waist. She looked beautiful but pale, her smile stretched thin, her body slightly tense. I noticed how carefully she balanced her champagne glass, as if afraid someone might notice she wasn't drinking. The perfect picture, the perfect lie. The evening unfolded with speeches, laughter, money pledges. I waited, watched, listened, until Matthew finally took the microphone. He spoke with his usual arrogance, thanking donors, praising his team, weaving in personal anecdotes designed to charm. And then, like always, he made it personal. This year is special for me, he said, smiling at her. After years of disappointment, I finally have everything I dreamed of. A strong partner, a future family, a life worth celebrating. Polite applause followed. Some people even turned to glance at me, whispers rippling through the crowd. I let them whisper, because this time I was ready. When the applause died down, I stepped forward. My heels clicked against the marble floor, the sound sharp and deliberate. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't wait for an invitation. I simply took the second microphone from the podium. The room hushed instantly. Funny thing about stories, I began, my voice steady, calm. They sound different depending on who's telling them. Matthew stiffened, his smile frozen. For 10 years, I continued, I was part of his story. The part he doesn't like to mention. The years of sacrifice, of silence, of humiliation. The years he calls disappointment, gasps, murmurs, but I didn't stop. Tonight he wants you to believe he's standing here as the picture of success. But pictures can lie, and sometimes the truth hides in the details people hope you never see. I pulled the folder from my bag, the papers I had printed, proof. These are insurance records, filed under his name. Proof that the woman he parades in front of you is not only fighting a complicated pregnancy but battling something much harder, cancer. A stunned silence fell. Her eyes widened, her glass slipping from her hand and shattering on the floor. She turned to Matthew, shock etched across her face. He didn't tell you, did he? I said softly, my voice breaking through the silence. He used your pain as his performance. He used both of us. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, phones flashing as people started recording. Matthew lunged forward, hissing, "Stop this. You don't know what you're talking about." But his mask was gone. The charm, the confidence, it all crumbled under the weight of the truth. And she pulled away from him, her face pale with realization. "Is it true?" she demanded, voice trembling. He stuttered. For the first time in his life, Matthew Reynolds stuttered. And that was enough. Because the crowd didn't need more. They saw it. The lies, the manipulation, the cruelty. Security escorted him out before the night was over. His colleagues avoided eye contact, his reputation collapsing faster than he could rebuild it. The next week, the firm announced his resignation. Rumors spread, deals dissolved, and for once, none of it was my burden. As for her, she reached out to me days later. Not as an enemy, not as a rival, but as a woman betrayed. We met quietly, no cameras, no crowd. She cried, told me she had suspected something but never dared to face it. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to, because the truth had already done its work. And me? I walked out of that gala with my head high, my belly round and proud, my future no longer defined by him. Weeks later, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The moment I held him, everything else, Matthew's lies, the humiliation, the years of silence, faded. All that mattered was the tiny heartbeat against my chest, the life that was mine to protect. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, and as I watched my son's eyes flutter open for the first time, I whispered, "They tried to erase me. But we wrote our own story instead." It's funny how life looks different when you're no longer carrying the weight of someone else's shadow. 2 months after the gala, I found myself in the park on a crisp autumn morning, a stroller in front of me and a warm cup of coffee in my hand. The trees blazed with gold and crimson, their leaves drifting down in slow spirals, landing softly on the path. My son stirred, tiny fists waving in the air, and I leaned down to tuck the blanket closer around him. For years, I used to walk through the same park with my head down, lost in thoughts that never seemed to end. Now I lifted my face to the sky. The air was sharp, cool, alive. Hannah joined me, a bag of bagels in one hand and her laughter in the other. She leaned over the stroller, cooing at her nephew. "He looks more like you every day," she said. I smiled, a real one. "Good, that's how I want it." We walked together, our steps unhurried, like time had finally slowed down enough for me to catch my breath. People passed by, families, couples, joggers, and for once I didn't compare myself to them. I didn't feel behind or less than. I felt exactly where I was supposed to be. At one point, we stopped near the pond where children were tossing breadcrumbs to ducks. My son yawned in his sleep, his tiny chest rising and falling, steady and strong. I reached into the stroller, brushing my hand gently across his cheek. "This," I whispered, "is our second chance." I thought about the years I had wasted trying to fit into Matthew's version of life, trying to be the woman he wanted, trying to meet expectations that kept moving further away. And I thought about how easily I had believed his lies, That I wasn't enough, that I was broken, that my story was over. But looking down at my son, I knew the truth. I wasn't broken. I was rebuilding. I wasn't erased. I was rewriting. And my story wasn't over. It had just begun. Some days are still hard. Sleepless nights, endless feedings, moments where the exhaustion feels like too much. But even in the hardest hours, I feel something I never did before. Peace. Because every sacrifice I make now is for love that is real, not conditional, not performative, not twisted by pride or control. As Hannah and I turned back toward home, the sun broke through the clouds, casting the path in a soft glow. The leaves crunched under our feet, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking alone. Life hadn't gone the way I planned. It had shattered, burned, collapsed in front of me. But from the ashes, something better had grown. Something stronger, quieter, truer. I looked at my son, then at the sky, and smiled. Because no matter what came next, we had already won.